Machiavelli never wasted time correcting someone who underestimated, because being underestimated is the cheapest advantage a strategic mind will ever be handed for free. You felt the other side of this. The moment someone dismissed you in a meeting and you watched them make decisions they never would have made if they'd known what you actually understood. The time you were counted out of a negotiation early and used that exact dismissal to get terms nobody else in the room would have gotten. The relationship where someone assumed you'd tolerate anything right up until the moment you didn't, and their whole strategy collapsed because it was built on a version of you that never existed. By the end of this, you'll understand why correcting people's low expectations of you is one of the most expensive habits a strategic person can have, and why the smartest move is almost always to let the miscalculation stand. Being underestimated gets treated like an insult that needs fixing. Most people's instinct, the moment they sense someone's misjudged their intelligence, their ambition, or their capability, is to correct it immediately, to prove the mistake wrong before it can cost them anything. Machiavelli would have called that instinct exactly backwards. The miscalculation isn't a threat to manage, it's a resource, and spending your energy correcting it is spending down an advantage most people would kill to have. The first principle is that whoever underestimates you has already told you their entire strategy. Watch what happens when someone assumes you're less capable than you are. They stop guarding against you. They speak more freely around you. Well, it's me. They reveal their actual priorities because they've calculated that revealing them to you costs nothing. This is information you could not get any other way, and it evaporates the second you correct their read. The moment you prove your competence, they recalibrate, they start guarding again, and the door that was open closes permanent. Machiavelli's princes who survived longest were rarely the ones who announced they're intelligent. They were the ones who let rivals believe they were dealing with someone simpler than they were, right up until it mattered. The second principle is that being underestimated removes you from the target list. This is counterintuitive because it feels like being overlooked should sting, should demand correction, should be fixed the moment you notice it happening. But think about how threats get identified in any competitive environment. People don't waste resources neutralizing what they don't perceive as dangerous. The person visibly building power, visibly ambitious, visibly capable, becomes a target precisely because their capability has been noticed. The person who's been quietly miscategorized as harmless operates with a kind of freedom the visibly impressive person never gets, because nobody's spending energy watching them for a countermove they don't believe is coming. Here's what's worth sitting with, because it's where this gets genuinely uncomfortable. Letting yourself be underestimated means tolerating being seen as less than you are, sometimes for a long time, sometimes by people whose opinion actually stings to have wrong. This isn't painless. There's a real cost to watching someone assume you're not capable of something you know you're capable of, and pretending that cost doesn't register would be dishonest. But the question isn't whether it stings, it's whether the sting is worth more than the advantage. Most people correct a misjudgment because the sting feels urgent in the moment, not because correcting it actually serves the outcome they're working toward. The third principle is timing the reveal, because being underestimated only functions as a weapon if you know exactly when to stop letting it stand. Machiavelli's insight wasn't always stay hidden. It was that the value of being underestimated exists specifically in the gap between what people think you can do and what you can actually do, and that gap is only useful up until the moment you need to use it. Hold it too long past that point, and you're not being strategic anymore. You're just being invisible for no reason, letting an advantage expire unused. The skill is recognizing the exact moment the miscalculation has finished doing its work and moving before the window closes, not a moment before you need to, and not a moment after. This is where the discipline separates from simple insecurity, because the two can look identical from the outside. Someone who's insecure also avoids revealing their full capability, but for a completely different reason. They're not managing a strategic advantage. They're protecting themselves from the risk of being seen and found wanting. The tell is in what happens when the reveal finally comes. The strategically underestimated person reveals with total confidence, because the concealment was always a choice. The insecure person reveals reluctantly, defensively, apologetically, because the concealment was never a choice at all. It was a hiding place they never intended to leave. John fed. The final realization is this: every time you've rushed to correct someone's low opinion of you, it wasn't really about strategy. Do that. It was about not being able to tolerate the discomfort of being misjudged, even temporarily, even when the misjudgment was working in your favor. Machiavelli's most dangerous men were rarely the ones who looked dangerous. They were the ones who let the room believe otherwise, for exactly as long as that belief served them, and not one moment longer than that. Being underestimated was never something that happened to them, never felt, never said to. They didn't feel sick, and they raised much from me. It was something they allowed on their timeline for their reasons, and that distinction is the entire game.